Hi there, and welcome to Wine Searcher. We're continuing our celebration of Californian Wine Month here. Do excuse the contractor digging a drain behind us, and sorry about the noise there. Today I'm having a look at Ridge's Lytton Springs, let's call it Lytton Springs Zinfandel, but we'll talk about that. I thought it would be good if we're talking about Californian wines to talk about what is almost California's own grape variety, Zinfandel. These days we now know it to be Primitivo from southern Italy, or has also been found to be Tribadrag from Croatia. But Zinfandel is a variety that the States has very much made its own, and this is a really classic example. As I say, it's not actually pure Zinfandel. We've got here, what are we saying, it's 18% Petite Sirah, 11% Carignan and 2% Mataro or Mourvedre. So grapes you would classically find growing throughout southern France. I understand the vineyard also has a tiny amount of Grenache in it, but it's not noted as having gone into this particular blend. This vineyard has been, Ridge have been making wines off this vineyard since 1972. It was one of their earlier vineyards. For the first 19 years they leased the vineyard and made the wines, and then in the early 90s they bought the vineyard and the winery, so it's now a complete estate wine. Their philosophy of making Zinfandel, some people will try and work Zinfandel really hard to make a really big, rich wine, whereas Ridge like to let the grapes express themselves. So this has quite a short maceration. It's only macerates for 8 days. It's treated very gently. They don't pump it anywhere, so you're not so the skins of the fruit aren't being churned up by that expression. They'll actually move the fermenting vessels and tip them into the press. The Petite Sirah was fermented as whole bunch, again to give a lovely softness and to allow the fruit to express itself really cleanly. Entirely produced with indigenous yeasts, malolactic fermentation completely done with indigenous malolactic bacteria, and the wine is aged for 13 months in oak, of which 20% is new, and Ridge only use American oak. On principle they only use American oak, but they have it coopered in the way that the French would. So instead of being kiln dried, it's air dried. So it has its own quite special properties, but it's not as overtly vanilla as American oak normally is if you see it used on Rioja or in Australia for Shirazes. So to talk about this wine, first of all, the colour on it. It's got a beautiful ruby, but it's a mid ruby. It's certainly not opaque. It's not a delicate light colour. There's a beautiful sort of ruby purple colour there. The wine is very viscous in the glass. You can see it's causing these tears. It has 14.5% odd alcohol there, and probably plenty of extract. To smell it, the aromas are a little closed in at the moment, but when you search, they're beautiful. You've got a really ripe sort of red-black sort of plum, bullace, damson, that sort of aroma. But then there are touches of over maturity as you get with sort of highly ripe black cherries, almost sort of moving on from the plum to a prune note, but not to the extent that it loses its freshness. There are notes of very much sort of chocolatey, probably more cocoa. It's that sort of slightly more drying seeming note, and if you look very carefully, there's slightly more sort of red fruit on the end. I was looking for sort of more a raspberry note, and it might be there, but it's probably more. People talk about Zinfandel sometimes showing brambly notes, and I would say on this occasion it's almost more to a sort of a loganberry, which can sometimes be a little bit more red fruit than black fruit sort of note there. Tasting it. I love this wine's sort of opulent hedonism, but at the same time it's actually got a little restraint to that. You've got this bursting, juicy, dark red, black cherry notes, supported by lovely fresh acidity. It's not sharp at all. There's a chocolatey texture and a cocoa-y taste, probably from having undergone malolactic conversion in the barrel. And those are beautifully, just beautiful. They don't stand out. They're beautifully integrated with the fruit. The oak doesn't stand out, and yet there is a vanilla hint that you can see there, but it's only hinted at. Cocoa, vanilla, cocoa butter almost. And the fruit is changing. The structure. There is a drying note to the mid palate from really incredibly fine, velvety textured tannins. They're not closing up the mouth at all because there's still this juicy, bursting fruit. The finish is long. You can it tastes heady and alcoholic, but not to an extent that it's warm or that the alcohol is dominating the fruit. The flavours are lasting beautifully, and as the finish opens up, there is more of that delicate, maybe slightly spiced, maybe slightly cinnamon notes, and sort of raspberry, loganberry, just enduring out to a sort of a lovely, long, supple red cherry finish. This wine's a delight. I find it never disappoints, and certainly hasn't on this occasion. If you're using Wine Searcher regularly, it's worth looking up the regions and blends that we put to these wines, because when you look, for instance, at the blend for Petite Sirah and Zinfandel that this is classified under, it's consistently reviewed as one of the best value, one of the best, and one of the most searched for. It's got good distribution worldwide. This is a really lovely example of a California wine, and also a wine that you could normally buy this for $70 US, depending on vintage and age. I mean, this says the age is 2014, but these are wines that to say a $70 US wine is great value is perhaps wrong, but if you compare that to the price of a Napa Valley Cabernet, this is an utter bargain, and it's a wine that has, you know, such concentration, such lovely structure, and good acidity, and this will age really nicely, and yet at any stage of its evolution it seems to be accessible and to deliver beautiful fruit. So happy Californian Wine Month, everybody. Let's keep celebrating that, and yeah, Zinfandel, a really interesting variety to explore, and some great producers. Bye now.